A victim of intimate partner violence may behave in ways that are difficult to understand for a person who hasn't experienced abuse. The victim might remain in the abusive relationship and perceive that killing the abuser is the only way to escape. Battered-woman syndrome, now commonly called battered-person syndrome, is a psychological theory that explains how the abuse impacts a victim. Bonner v. State considers whether expert testimony on the syndrome is compatible with a victim's claim of self-defense. Barbara Bonner suffered mental and physical abuse at the hands of her husband, Curtis Bonner. At least 3 times a month, Curtis used his fists to beat Barbara. Witnesses saw him force her into a wall, and on one occasion, he shot at her with a firearm. Barbara repeatedly called the police and sought assistance obtaining a divorce. But she stayed in the relationship. Curtis would apologize and beg her not to divorce him. After an evening of drinking, Curtis began abusing Barbara. Barbara fought back, grabbing a knife and stabbing Curtis. He died of his injuries, and the state charged Barbara with manslaughter. At trial, several witnesses testified that Curtis and Barbara had an abusive relationship. A police officer, as well as Barbara's son and niece, confirmed that Curtis repeatedly abused Barbara. Barbara defended the manslaughter charge with a claim of self-defense. Self-defense requires that the defendant reasonably perceived that deadly force was necessary to prevent imminent harm. But the state undermined Barbara's claim of self-defense by arguing that she stayed in the relationship, raising an inference that she wasn't afraid of Curtis. Barbara offered expert testimony regarding battered-woman syndrome. The expert, a social worker, would have explained the effect of abuse, including why victims stay in abusive relationships. The trial court refused to admit the expert's testimony. The court reasoned that Barbara hadn't established she was in an abusive relationship. Without that foundation, expert testimony on battered-woman syndrome wasn't appropriate. Moreover, the court reasoned that the testimony would confuse the jury. Barbara was convicted of manslaughter. She appealed to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals.